Todd Dunn here, back in the boat yard, and this morning I came over and trimmed off the bungs and took my belt sander to these planks and sanded them fair with the rest of the hull, and then took a lighter grade sander and sanded it out to 80 grit. So this is ready for the next step, which is to begin caulking. So what I'm going to be doing is simply hammering caulking cotton into the seams here, and when I finish that, unless I forgot it at home, I'm going to go and putty the seams. So I'm going to start here just by starting the cotton in a little bit. Working it in with the caulking iron. The purpose of this cotton is to provide a bit of a seal, and in addition to that, to lock the planking so that it doesn't shift, it doesn't move, to give it a little bit of something to bind against. So here we go, that's in. Now, I don't use a regular caulking mallet. I use one of these just to hammer, which works quite adequately. The only difference I've noticed is that it is a little bit noisier than a caulking mallet, but I find that it's much easier to handle. A big bulky caulking mallet, to my way of thinking, is quite a cumbersome tool to use. I'll go through here and knock the cotton in a couple of passes. First pass sets it, and I'll come back. Second pass, and get it in the rest of the way. I only have about 8 feet of seam to do here, so this won't take long. I'm going to pull this out and thin this a little bit because the seam here where I put the scarf in is a little bit shallow. Just about finished with this one. Okay, that seam's done. This next seam is pretty narrow, so I'm going to take my cotton and tear the strand in half because I just don't think I can get a full strand in there. So we'll just work down here. That should be enough. And we'll start setting it up here. There we go. She's all caulked. Since these are scarf joints, obviously there's no caulking there. So, next step is to get my putty out and putty the seams. Okay, I've got my putty out and start filling the seams. I'm using an epoxy-based putty called System 3 Quick Fair instead of a regular oil-based putty for a couple of reasons. Well, for one reason really, and that is that it is November in Maine and it's not very warm, and a normal oil-based putty really probably wouldn't cure for weeks or maybe not until next spring, which would make it difficult to get a coat of paint on here. So I'm using this both to fill the seams and to fill the holes that were left over from the screws I put in close up that last scarf. Just leaving it a little proud over the holes so that I won't have to come back and do it again. And this is quick. Even though it's an epoxy-based putty, it's a fairing compound. It's quite soft, and my experience is that it will not, it will crush a little bit and will not damage the seams. The only trick is getting it out, because it is an epoxy-based fairing compound, and it does bond to the wood very well. Put a little bit up here to fill some spots where I gouged it with my belt sander while I was sanding. We'll work our way across here. This also sands very nicely, and it will set even at the temperatures we're experiencing now, which are going to be pretty cold. I'm expecting an overnight low tonight in the upper 20s. And it'll warm up to about 50 tomorrow, or at least it's supposed to. So this stuff will normally cure to the point where you can sand it in about 2 hours at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And given that it's 45 degrees today, and will probably It's supposed to get to the low 50s tomorrow. It'll probably be ready to sand tomorrow afternoon. It's not going to cure much overnight tonight. But as I said, an oil-based putty would still be just like it was when it went in tomorrow, and I wouldn't be able to sand it for quite a while. But this sands very nicely. And tomorrow when assuming it's set well enough, tomorrow when I sand it, I'll be able to maybe even get a coat of paint on here tomorrow. The fact that I'm using this instead of a regular seam compound does illustrate one thing, and that is when it comes to working on wood boats, I am not a purist. I do not go with what everybody was using 100 years ago. I go with what works for me. And this seam, once it's set, will be pretty much completely waterproof. And it'll keep that cotton in there. Trying to leave this just a little proud because it does shrink a little on cure. And ideally, I would like my seams to effectively disappear. We'll see how they go. And just have the stem to do now. And it'll be done. Imperfection in the wood. And the last thing I'm going to do is just putty over the bungs in case there are any gaps. any other spots that look a little funky. So that more or less does it. I can go a little more up here, just fill that hole. And I'm finished. She's caulked. And I've puttied the seams. By tomorrow afternoon, this fairing compound should be cured enough to sand it, and I'll be able to sand it out. It may be necessary, if I want it to look really pretty, to put another thin application on there. We'll find out tomorrow when I come back. Let's work what's left on the putty knife into spots that look like they could use a little dab here or there. And I can get a coat of paint on here. And basically, once I get a coat of paint on here, a little bit more right there. Just go over the scarves, just in case there are any imperfections in them. The ends of the scarves. Okay, just tomorrow afternoon I'll run over this with my random orbital sander, and at that point I'll be ready to put paint on. And I think, assuming that I'm right about this curing out by tomorrow, that I will be able to get a coat of paint on here, and I'll show you the finished project tomorrow after the first coat of paint. As I said, I want to put 3 on to finish it. And that way in the spring I'll have a decent base here for putting my final top coat on for next year. So here we go. You've seen this entire project through, from cutting the initial hole in the hull to filling it with new wood with epoxy scarf joints, and now caulking and puttying. So it's a relatively daunting project when you first cut the hole in the hull, but when it comes down to it, it's not that difficult, and anybody who is patient can do this kind of repair on their own wooden boat. So thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Give me a thumbs up if you did. Any comments you want to make, I will respond to them, and please subscribe to my channel.